So today I'm going to show you how to make a patchwork piece of fabric that you can turn into anything you want. A garment, an accessory. This is my first ever sewing tutorial, so I hope everything makes sense. I tried to make it as easy and clear as possible. After I show you how to make the patchwork fabric, I went ahead and also showed you how to make this cute little tote. It's so incredibly easy, and I hope everything makes sense for you. And if you have any questions, please leave them below. Let's get started. So I started by choosing the fabric I wanted. I have a bunch of cotton fat quarters, so I just picked the ones I liked that seemed to go well color-wise, and then I went ahead and pressed all of them to make sure there were no wrinkles or creases. After that, I went ahead and cut out 3.5-inch strips, and then went ahead and cut those into 3.5 by 3.5 squares. I'm using a rotary blade, but you can also cut out a piece of cardboard or paper and use that as your guide to cut all of the squares out. I cut out about 50 squares total, but I only used about 40 for the entire patchwork fabric. I then laid them out until I found a randomized pattern that I liked. I thought this was going to be the final pattern, but then I realized the second row down are all the same. So it definitely takes a little bit of time to get the pattern to be more visually pleasing and not so repetitive. Once your squares are cut out, you're going to sew them together, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I have them over here neatly laid out. I will pop up a picture of the layout I'm going with. It took a really long time to balance the colors out and make sure there weren't too many color pools, but I think I figured it out eventually. I stacked these in order, and then I'm just going to go through and sew them together. So you're going to take your two squares and put them together, right sides facing each other, just like that. And then I'm going to sew them together on the edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. Look at that, beautiful. So I'm gonna just continue adding on squares, right sides together, sew it, and that's done. Take another square, right sides together, sew it to make one long strip, and then I'll show you what to do once the strip is done. Okay, all of the strips are sewn. This is what they look like. And here is the back. Now we need to head to the kitchen so we can press the seams. So I laid out the strips in order of how they go. This is the top part, goes up here, and then this is the bottom part. So the seams are sticking up like that. And when we are ironing these, we need the seams to go opposite directions on each strip. So I'm gonna iron this top piece, all going to my left, and I'm gonna iron the one underneath going to the right, and then sew on throughout the strips, left, right, because then when we go to sew these together, the seams will be flat like that and not create a bump or a bulky spot. If you sew them together and they're facing this way, you're gonna have to sew through 6 layers of fabric. But if you sew them opposite, you're only sewing through 3 layers of fabric, if that makes sense. I am using the steam setting, by the way, just to make sure everything is perfectly flat, and I'm also getting out all of the wrinkles that I may have made while constructing these strips. The seams are all pressed, and here is what they look like. Now that these strips are done, we are gonna take 2 of them, right sides together, and we are gonna sew them together. Your seams should be opposite of each other, and we're just gonna make one straight line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this is what it looks like. And if you really look at it, not every square is lined up, and that's okay for me because not everything is going to be perfect. But if you really want them to line up, you're going to have to make sure that they are lined up perfectly. But the thing is, this top one is lined up nicely. By the time I got to the bottom, they weren't lined up. So it's okay for me. This is what the back looks like with all the seams. Nice. Now I'm just going to take strip by strip and just sew all of them together to make one piece of fabric. All of them are sewn together. Look how beautiful. Oh my gosh. This is what the back looks like. All of the seams going up and down. And now, you guessed it, we are gonna go press these seams, which will also help flatten out this piece of fabric as well. So to press these seams, I'm just gonna press them all going to my left. It doesn't really matter if they're alternating or not, but we do want them to be flat. There we go, look at that. I'm gonna turn it over, and now I'm going to press this. Sometimes there's a little bit of a gap between the seams, so I just wanna make sure everything is super flat. So now we have a piece of patchwork fabric. So beautiful. You can do so many things with this. Of course, if you're making something big, you would add more squares in either direction. And if you are not going to line this fabric, you might want to finish your seams off with like a zigzag stitch or serge it if you have that, just because cotton frays so bad. The other option is if you need the fabric to be stiff, you can use interfacing and put that onto the back. What I am going to be doing with this fabric is just making a little tote bag. I'm going to use the patchwork on the outside and then just have like a plain fabric on the inside. Something super simple, super cute, and useful. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's very, very easy. It's definitely a beginner project for sure. To figure out how many squares I needed, I kept adding squares and measuring it. I know that with the seam allowances, it's going to shrink a little bit. So even with that said, this piece of fabric is 15 inches by 22 and a half. So not bad. I can still make a really cute little tote with it and maybe even add a pocket on the inside with this fabric. So yeah, let's get started. What you're gonna need to make this tote is your patchwork fabric. You're going to need a lining fabric. I am using a flat sheet that is tan. It's very simple. You can do whatever you want on the inside. I also taped together some paper and cut out a 12 by 11 inch rectangle. And then I did a 3.5 by 11 inch piece for the handle. I'm also adding a pocket, so I cut out a 6 by 6 inch square for that. You're also going to need a ruler, pins, and some fabric scissors, and of course, a sewing machine. For the main part of the bag, I cut out two 11 by 12 inch rectangles out of the patchwork fabric, and I did the same thing for the lining. And for the handles, I used the patchwork fabric as well. And then I very quickly just sewed together two 2x2 squares here to make a pocket, and then I'm gonna line it with the liner. Now I'm gonna take all of the tote bag pieces and cut a 1.5 by 1.5 square out of the corners, which I'll show you what that looks like right now. I'm using an air and water soluble ink marker, so this should disappear over time and not leave any purple on my actual piece. And now I'm just gonna cut the square out. This will be the bottom of the bag, and this is what's gonna make it a little bit more square on the bottom so it can sit upright-ish. And now I'm gonna do that to the other patchwork piece and both of the liner pieces. All of them have the little cutouts on the bottom. I definitely should have turned this one like upside down because when I sew them together, the green and the purple are gonna be touching, which is so annoying. And if I did it this way, the orange would be touching, but it would be like a little bit more, broken up a bit. But okay, can't do anything about it now. So now I'm gonna take my two exterior pieces and I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to pin both sides, and then I'm gonna sew them together. I'm gonna be using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on the sides here, and I'm just gonna do a straight line. So these are sewn together. Now for the lining, I wanted to add a pocket. So before I sew them together, I'm going to make a pocket and then sew the pocket onto the lining, and then we will sew the lining together. If you don't want a pocket at all, you can skip to whatever time I put up in this area. But if you do want a pocket, then I will show you how to do it. There are so many ways to make a pocket, and I'm gonna do it just a very simple way. So I'm gonna put the right sides together. I'm gonna sew all around the square, but I'm gonna leave 2 inches at the bottom here open so I can turn the pocket inside out. First, I'm actually gonna trim the pocket because the patchwork piece is a little bit bigger than the lining. I hope you can see the seams. And right down here is where I stopped and left, I don't know, 1.5 or 2 inches. So now I'm gonna trim the corners. I'm just gonna cut them off like this. and that's gonna help it to turn better when we turn it inside out. And the reason why I stopped in the middle and not like an edge is because it's so much easier to press the seam when it's in the middle than it is if it's on an edge. So keep that in mind. I'm also just gonna trim some of the seam line, probably just down to maybe a quarter or so it's not so bulky. Now we have one really neat pocket and we are gonna go press it. So let's head to the kitchen again. So I'm gonna take this pocket and turn it inside out. Make sure I get all of the corners. If your corners aren't sharp enough, usually stick something in there to kind of get them to poke out a little bit more. And now I'm going to turn the seams in on this open spot and I'm going to press it. And then I'm just gonna go around and try my best to even out this seam and then press it. So I have my two pockets. They kind of look a little wonky, but I think it's gonna be fine. I mostly had issues on the open part and the patchwork right there, but it's gonna be okay. So now I'm gonna take the lining and I'm gonna find the right side. I'm just gonna place this right in the middle and I'm going to be mindful of where the bottom is and how far away it is from the top and the sides as well. I'm just gonna try my best to find the middle and I'm going to pin it in place. And as we're sewing this onto the lining, this bottom open part will be sewed together as well, so it'll no longer be open. Now I'm just going to sew right on the edge here, probably 1/8 of an inch. I'm gonna do that down the sides and down the bottom, leaving the top open, of course. All right, the pockets are on. Beautiful. This one. Now that the pockets are on there, we're going to sew the sides together. So it's going to be exactly the same as the front. Right sides together, sew down the sides, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that the sides are all sewn together, we are going to sew the bottom. So on the patchwork piece, the exterior piece, we're gonna sew 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on the bottom. And on the lining piece, we're gonna do the same thing, except we are going to leave another opening, probably like 2.5 to 3 inches. And that is so we can sew these together and then be able to turn it all inside out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So now we are gonna press the seams open on the bottom. So I'm gonna lay it flat like this and just turn the seam up like that and then press it. And then I'm gonna flip it over and do the same thing to this back seam. And then I'm gonna do the same thing to the lining. And now we're gonna take these corner pieces, open it up like that, and then we're gonna sew right there. And by doing that on both sides, you're gonna create a flat bottom. Also, if your cutout here isn't even, you can go ahead and trim off the extra fabric to make it perfectly square. It'll make it a lot easier to sew. And you're gonna do the same thing to the lining, sew across the corner. And now I'm gonna show you how to make the handles. Just like pockets, there are a million ways to make handles or straps. And I think this is by far the easiest way to do it. So we're gonna take our strap pieces and we're going to press them so they make a nice strip with no raw edges. So the first thing we are going to do is fold it in half, wrong sides together, and then press. Then we're going to open it up and turn about 1/2 inch or so and then press that and do the same thing to the other side. And now we're going to fold it in half again, match up our seams here and press once more. And your handle should look like this. And now we are going to take our handles and we are going to sew like 1/8 of an inch right on the edge, sew them together. And then we're going to turn it around and we're going to do the same thing on this side. So both edges will be sewn together. So here is how they look now. Not too bad. We are going to sew the handles to the bag. So we're going to take our patchwork side and we're going to turn it so the right side is out. It should look like this with a flat bottom. So I am going to lay it flat and I'm going to attach the handles to it. First, I'm going to trim the top here so it's even. And I'm going to take this handle and place it 2.5 inches away from the side. I'm going to pin it and I'm going to do the same over here. And I'm going to sew just right here, 1/4 of an inch away from the top. Just one little line to attach this handle. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is more of an anchoring stitch because this handle will be sandwiched between the patchwork fabric and the lining. And then I'm gonna do the same exact thing to the other side. So now we're gonna take the exterior with our handles on, and we're going to put it inside the lining. So the lining is inside out still, and we're just going to slide it into here. Put your handles down, and then we're gonna match up the seams, the side seams here, and pin them. And once it's all pinned around, we are going to sew it 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around the top. With them now sewn together, we're gonna go in through this hole that we left in the lining, and we're going to turn it inside out. There we go. This is what it should look like. Nice. We are going to sew this seam up. And since we pressed it, it should be nice and crisp and really easy to just sew one line about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Once that is done, we're gonna shove the lining into the bag. We're almost done. This is the last step. So cute. Now we are going to top stitch the edge here. So it's nice and flat and it's not like loose like that. So I'm just gonna make sure they're completely even, and then I'm gonna sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge and just kind of seal the top edge of the bag. And that is it. The bag is done. So cute. And since it has that flat bottom, it can kind of sit, maybe if it has stuff in it. And I have 2 pockets in there. I'm gonna be using my bag as a project bag for my cross stitch and embroidery. It's the perfect little size for it. You can so easily customize this pattern to make it bigger, like wider, taller, have multiple pockets in there, have pockets on the outside. There's like so many ways that you could do this. You also don't have to do squares. You could do rectangles, or rectangles and squares, or triangles. There's so many options out there. I will link my Patchwork Pinterest board in the description. I've pinned lots of inspiration there on different types of bags and patchwork patterns. So go check that out if you need some inspiration. But there it is. So cute. I love it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope your bag turns out so well. If you make this bag or make patchwork fabric, tag me on Instagram if you want. I want to see all of your projects. Hopefully I will see you in the future with more projects that I'm working on, and I hope your projects turn out so amazing. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.